SDCC action figures, Powerball Deluxe figures, and mini action sets are each sold separately. From Irwin.
Yo, another blast from the past right there. We've come a hell of a long way from those Irwin days. But you know, I will say this. The fact that you can collect almost every character imaginable in almost every outfit they ever wore in the series is still something unmatched. Forget thinking about your wallet for a second and indulge with me on this one thought. Close your eyes and imagine all these characters reattainable in Figuarts form. Oh man, where's Shenron when you need him? Or is this more of a matter for Zarama? Well, until we find all 7 Dragon Balls, I guess we'll have to wait and see what Tamashii has in store for us for the future. Nonetheless, you guys asked for it, we all knew it was coming, and now here it is. I give you the History of S.H. Figuarts Dragon Ball Figures Part 2. So, at the end of 2015, we saw the release of a truly pivotal figure which gave rise to a new era in Figuarts, almost like night and day compared to the previous releases, right down to the new style of packaging. Not only was Awakening Super Saiyan Goku featuring a whole new style of body and articulation, this was the first battle damage iteration of a character we'd ever seen in the line, and it's no secret that SH Figuarts products are not cheap. Yet with this Awakening Goku, it finally felt like they hit the nail right on the head, and produced a figure worth every single penny. Awakening Goku also featured denser plastic and tighter joints in previous releases, as well as different paint apps featuring more saturated colors that really made the figure pop. Now, while the paint apps were new, it didn't quite seem as though the paint shading on some of the older figures carried through to Awakening Goku, for his body anyways. This Goku also presented a new faceplate capturing an angry look that really seems like it came straight from the source material. Finally, Dragon Ball fans would be able to recreate that iconic battle on planet Namek, albeit substituting this Frieza for 100% Power Frieza. The line continued strong into 2016, exhibiting a total of 8 released for the year. Entering 2016, we ended off 2015 with a bang, and maybe the guy who Tamashii released next wanted to give fans his take on that bang, or more so, Big Bang Attack. That's right, the arrival of 2016 also heralded the arrival of Super Saiyan Vegeta, a release many fans have been waiting for since his original release back in the day. Now, this was PC or Premium Color Vegeta. This Vegeta was not part of the 2.0 line of figures recently seen with Awakening Goku. It presented a much more accurate anime color on the body, as well as a hyper-stylized, saturated, glossy paint for the Super Saiyan hair, almost as if this figure was a mix between the manga and anime. It gave collectors a much cheaper alternative than spending half a stack on the original Super Saiyan Vegeta. The Prince of All Saiyans had returned and finally satisfied many fans who asked for a reissue all these years. Now, shortly after, as if hearing the cries of fans once again, Tamashii followed through with the release of PC Trunks, once again sparing many fans from the aftermarket prices which reigned supreme on sites like eBay and Amazon. This Trunks, being PC, featured a saturated paint scheme just like his PC father before him, which was a nice touch to make the figure pop. Again, the one thing that appeared to be sacrificed for this paint scheme was the shading in the hair seen with the original release of Trunks. On that note, it's important to realize that this was not a straight reissue of the original. This release was much more rounded, cutting the original 7 faces to 5 and the original 7 pairs of hands to 5 as well. In addition, PC Trunks actually appeared to be slightly shorter than the original release. As much as this was a change, it helped Tamashii stay true to their word in keeping certain products exclusive and more valuable for those fans who were fortunate enough to get their hands on the original release. Alright, so the arrival of March brought with it the first release of a 2.0 figure since Awakening Goku, and a brand new character featuring a brand new sculpt, the one and only Lord Beerus. Beerus featured an incredible likeness to his anime counterpart, right down to the ruffles in his pants. His paint apps hit the mark quite well and complemented the higher quality plastic used quite nicely, resulting in a figure that was just awesome to have in hand. While he didn't come with the most extra parts, it was quite difficult to find something wrong with the Destruction Deity's figure. Despite being such a new character in the franchise and the amount of catnaps the character seemed to take, Beerus the Destroyer was definitely not a figure that should have been slept on. Now, it's also interesting to note that March 2016 was also when the new prototype for Super Saiyan 4 Goku was shown. The figure featured what appeared to be newly implemented 2.0 technology and looked even better than the original prototype. However, this was no way indicative of a release, nor would there be any news of his release anytime soon. Now, as if the Prince of All Saiyans had finally awakened after waiting several years for a reappearance in the line, he was back once again, and this time sporting a new look right down to the sculpt of the body. Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Vegeta, or Super Saiyan Blue as many fans know it now, had arrived for Vegeta, almost as if playing catch-up to Goku just like in the anime. Now, this figure featured Vegeta's new armor as presented in the Dragon Ball Z movie, yes, not Super, Resurrection F, and wow, the look of this figure came out great. His sculpt actually presented a much slimmer toned look with less muscle mass, possibly reflecting how the original God form accomplished this as well as in the anime. Now, there was quite a lot of chatter about the figure not receiving the 2.0 treatment, but it might have been released this way to keep things consistent with the Super Saiyan Blue Goku figure. Speaking of Super Saiyan Blue Goku, it's worth noting that different paints were used for Goku and Vegeta's blue forms. While Super Saiyan Blue Goku's hair sculpt did feature some shading, Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta's hair sculpt was purely metallic blue. Why this choice was made is unclear, and to some, a non-metallic paint would have been preferred. In addition, Vegeta did not feature a base form head as Goku's figure did, which was something much to be desired for those who missed out on the Saiyan Saga Vegeta. Nonetheless, the figure does a good job of providing collectors with a modern look for Vegeta and presented new fans with an opportunity to once again collect a major player in the Dragon Ball franchise. Well, like father, like son. Kind of seeing a pattern here for this year, as shortly after his father's release again, Trunks followed. However, it looked as though Trunks learned a thing or two from the future as he was released with 2.0 technology. This Trunks was vastly different than any Trunks released before it. It featured new technology in the legs as well as an entirely new iteration for the character. Now, despite this new tech in the legs, it did cause quite a stir among the community. As it turned out, the new tech may not have been all it was cracked up to be, creating some new issues with articulation that may have been unseen in the initial showings of the figure. Aside from this, the figure included a base form as well as Super Saiyan heads, with the base form presenting the longer purple hair as seen after his emergence from the hyperbolic time chamber. Some additional criticism of the figure was that both his non-yelling faces had eyes painted off to the side, which presented some issues when desiring to pose the figure looking straight on. Again, despite its flaws, it was still picked up by many fans and is still available to this day. I still wonder though, what happened to this head? Now, June was interesting because other than being a month away from the San Diego Comic-Con, it featured the re-release of Awakening Goku, a smart move by Tamashii to produce another wave of almost perfect iteration of an iconic character. While this figure was not a web exclusive, it presented an opportunity for new fans to jump into the line without paying insane aftermarket prices. Now, as with every year, SDCC had arrived, and this year's exclusive was Broly. As with all SDCC exclusives, this Broly did not feature a new sculpt, but rather presented a much more movie-accurate color scheme, or more accurate to movie 8, whereas his original figure could be said to be more representative of his appearance in movie 10. This exclusive presented an opportunity for fans who missed out on the original to get their hands on such an awesome figure if they were fortunate enough to pre-order it, or fortunate enough to get their hands on some Comic-Con tickets. SDCC Broly featured a more natural looking skin tone as well as a truly green shade of hair. Ironically, even a few Broly haters bit their tongue and picked this figure up, and today its value, much like other SDCC exclusives, is sky high. While the decision to make Broly the year's SDCC exclusive may remain questionable to some, perhaps it was a business move by Tamashii, as they stated if Broly did well, they'd invest more time in releasing other characters such as Nappa. This summer also brought with it some surprises. Yamcha and Tien were finally shown, and the last of the most recent DBZ movie characters would be released in Whis. So continuing down the path of modern characters for regular releases, we saw Whis, who paired perfectly with the recently released Beerus, Super Saiyan Blues, and Golden Frieza. From an aesthetic standpoint, Whis was pretty much flawless, right down to the floating orb in his staff. Excellent job done by Tamashii. In terms of articulation, Whis was limited by the hard plastic skirt around his legs. While Whis wasn't a character in insane demand, it was still appreciated and well received in the community. Finally, Universe 7's dynamic deity duo could be posed in your very own displays. Now, rounding off 2016, we'd see the release of yet another Vegeta figure, but this time in 2.0 fashion. While some fans kinda rolled their eyes of yet another release of a character the line already had instead of a new character, this version of Vegeta was actually quite good, and if not, the most definitive version of Vegeta to date. This 2.0 Vegeta featured a bulkier frame that not only applied to the body, but to the hair sculpt as well. When paired side by side with the 1.0 Vegeta, it's almost as if this release was meant to be Super Vegeta from the Cell Saga. Nonetheless, this 2.0 featured the same saturated paint scheme as the rest of the 2.0s, as well as the leg tech seen in the Trunks figure. Now while the last Vegeta featured a glossier hair paint, this version actually had some shading in the hair, as well as some better looking, more anime accurate face features. A highly welcome change, the only thing missing possibly being a Final Flash accessory. Now before the year's end, we'd also get to see the reveal of a few more figures announced in the line. So, 2017 was another busy year for the line, featuring a total of 11 releases, almost one release per month, and if this wasn't a sign of the line's health and prosperity, I don't know what was. January saw the release of a battle-damaged Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. Now this figure was incredible, almost as if following in the steps of Awakening Goku, this figure nailed the sculpt as well as the paint apps. Tamashii was even so generous as to include a Super Saiyan hair sculpt as well. Everything on this figure, right from the sharper lines contrasting with the flesh tones of the faceplates, to the ripped and jagged edges of Gohan's battle-damaged gi, screamed must-have for any Figuarts collector out there. And more importantly, this Gohan could actually stand up well, unlike his 1.0 counterpart. If 2017 was a time when someone was thinking about getting into the line, this was a perfect time to do so. Speaking of perfect, February brought with it the release of PC Cell, another character fans have been asking for a reissue of since the original Cell was released so much earlier. And you know those aftermarket prices, sky high. Now being PC, there was no change in sculpt aside from perhaps the uncanny lines under his eyes that are not present on the original release. PC Cell featured a much brighter saturated paint scheme than the original, as well as tighter joints, which was a problem the original presented, particularly in the knees. PC Cell also fortunately released the original accessories that Cell came with, albeit PC colored, which is very fortunate to those just joining the line once again. Interestingly enough, this version of Cell almost made the colors a bit too bright, and while the original was a bit too dull for anime accuracy, it seems Tamashii just missed the mark on making this perfect. Perhaps if the colors were met in the middle of the original and the PC release, we'd truly have a perfect Cell. So with the popularity of Xenoverse games, Tamashii decided to try and capitalize off this by releasing a Xenoverse Trunks and the protagonist from the series decked out in 2.0 form. These releases featured all of the articulation and paint schemes found in the rest of the 2.0s, however, they were more niche releases. For Trunks, this was the first 2.0 iteration of his shorter hair that we'd see, and the first entirely for the hero of the game. Both figures paired well with each other, but acted more so as filler releases among the community, as since the announcement of figures such as 2.0 Scouter Vegeta and Nappa, fans were anxious for those ones. Now 2017's exclusive found itself in Kaioken Goku, as part of Tamashii's world tour for the year. This was pretty much a repaint of the 2015 SDCC exclusive Namek Saga Goku. This time around, however, the paint had much more red, pink, and black undertones indicative of Goku using Kaioken. This release also featured a face not available with the regular Goku releases, which really does the figure justice when posed in scenes with Frieza or Saiyan Saga Vegeta, and perhaps most notably, this was the first figure to come with the newest aura effects produced by Tamashii. Now what's more is another Goku was revealed in the form of Super Saiyan God Goku, scheduled for release later this year. Now at SDCC this year, Tamashii revealed even more, yet familiar faces in the form of Goku, expected to be released in 2018. The first of these was Kid Goku, the line's first real delve into Dragon Ball, and the second of these was the notorious Goku Black, the first delve into the Super franchise if you discount Beerus, Whis, Super Saiyan Blue, and Golden Frieza. If you can imagine, both of these created quite a buzz, especially for the older fans who are more inclined towards Dragon Ball, and the newer, younger fans who identify more with Dragon Ball Super. Now speaking of Saiyan Saga Vegeta, the summer of 2017 finally brought with it two of the most highly anticipated releases for the year in Scouter Vegeta 2.0 and Nappa. Now 2.0 Scouter Vegeta used the same mold as 2.0 Super Saiyan Vegeta right down to the hair. And this was subject to some controversy in the community. While it was a very welcome release to those who missed out on any base form Vegeta in the past, this Vegeta, while possessing superior articulation to its predecessor, appeared slightly too tall and bulky when compared to Nappa. On a positive note, this Vegeta featured all the extras the original came with and then some, right down to two highly detailed scouters, with one having a readout. In addition, his joints were improved and the figure was able to stand much easier than the original. His partner in crime Nappa followed shortly after, as this was definitely a momentous release. Aside from Broly and Android 16, Nappa was the first larger character release in the line in a good while. And it seems that the time Tamashii took to release him was justified, as the figure featured the newest 2.0 tech, had an exquisite sculpt, with the only gripe among fans being that the figure had its manga coloration instead of the anime colors. A small gripe nonetheless. At long last, the Saiyan whose head resembled the head of cabbage was available for fans all over the world to add to their collection. Now, as the final portion of 2017 was underway, it's safe to say that Tamashii once again planned to end 2017 with a bang. And the first figure in this 2017 wrap-up plan was 2.0 Super Saiyan 3 Goku. This was a major improvement over the initial Super Saiyan 3 Goku figure, leagues better in articulation and paint. This was also the first 2.0 Goku mold in the line that we would receive fully clad in his blue and orange gi. Numerous issues such as the figure not being able to stand at all were fixed, and it offered fans a chance to get this form of Goku for a closer to reasonable price, as although the first release was horrendous, his price was sky high and left no alternatives to fans wanting this daunting transformation. While this was definitely an improvement, the community commented that there were still some things left to be desired for the figure, such as better paint apps. However, this was still a very well received release and a definitive one to remember for 2017. Now, as if the line had never had enough Goku entries, Super Saiyan God Goku was the next release, also using the same 2.0 body mold. While this figure was a nice take on a modern reflection of the franchise, it seemed that there were some issues as it was achieving mixed reactions from the community. Their first critique was that the figure was too bulky and did not reflect the slimmer form that Super Saiyan God was known to have. The second is that the paint apps on the head felt slightly rushed, almost as if a red version of Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta's metallically painted head. Other than this, fans who desired this iteration of Goku now had a decent figure that they could pose with Beerus to recreate their favorite Battle of Gods scenes. Now, between releases, we'd also get a few sneak peeks at some figures to come, including Master Roshi, a Teenage Bulma, and perhaps the most desired of all, a Frieza re-release. All these figures generated a massive amount of hype and brought with them even more amounts of desirability. In addition, it seemed Tamashii wanted to provide Frieza with a more modern touch, including his halo as he's seen now in Dragon Ball Super. Now, compared to the very next release, perhaps Super Saiyan God Goku did seem like it was lackluster, as the mighty Shenron finally arrived to the line. This was, and still is to this date in 2018, the largest figure in the line, reaching the size akin to some S.H. Monster Arts figures. While he wasn't as large or even presented in the same color scheme as the prototype teased years ago, this was a definite home run in the line. Shenron featured immaculate detail and incredible sculpt, and while does not have the articulation as some of the other S.H. Figuarts or Monster Arts, he's still a very worthy addition to the line. This, in addition to the fact that he came with a gigantic size stand for his support and very little issues being supported by it, makes Shenron one of the best and most iconic figures in the Dragon Ball line, period. Perhaps the only thing missing was some LED lights in the base under the Dragon Balls. The second to last release of 2017 presented another familiar face clad in orange in the form of Yamcha. This figure, despite being from a cult-like fan favorite, brought all the good things about previous 2.0s into the mix to incorporate one solid release. It featured the latest cuts and tech for the best articulation possible, including articulated hair, some weathering in tones of paint, avoiding a completely glossed out or matted look, and saw the inclusion of the first minifigure in the form of a Cyberman. I wish I was saying this about Cell Jr. with Cell, but I'm not complaining at all. For those who desired him, as well as completionists, it looked like the Figuarts Dragon Ball Z roster was slowly beginning to fill out, and this trend stayed true with the next release in the form of Tien. Now, if you thought that the reveals for future figures was over for the year, you better have thought again, because Tamashii was able to make a play to rope in newer fans in the line, announcing the release of yet another Goku figure for 2018 in Goku, a Saiyan Raised on Earth. More importantly, Tamashii claims this figure will receive a reasonable price point around $35 USD, and is expected to be released mid-2018. Now, wrapping up 2017 was another member of the Z-Fighter crew, Tien. This was another incredible release in the line, and he followed in his buddy's footsteps by including his other buddy, Chaozu. Now, Tien itself is near perfect. It featured the latest tech for the body and some minor new upgrades in the form of notches on his tri-beam hands to help line up the hands just perfectly when posing him for his signature move. Tien also presents some more variety in the line in the sense that he's another figure that is taller than Goku. At the end of 2017, it seemed like the Saiyan saga was near completion in Figuarts form, with only a few core characters remaining to be seen. Alright, so happy new year! At the time of this video, we're almost caught up in our history with the line. I hope you're still with me, and if you are, let's dive right back in. 2018's first release was Kid Goku. Now, the prototype for this figure was seen years ago, and the final product looked to be noticeably different. Despite this, for what he's supposed to represent, on his own is a spectacular figure. The inclusion of his power pole and Nimbus were extremely nice touches that were sure to play on fans' nostalgia. One major criticism with this figure was the scale. While scale in general has never been a true strength of S.H. Figuarts figures, when placing him next to his adult self, he's simply too large. However, there is a method to the madness. First, if the figure were any smaller, it would be sacrificing detail as well as articulation. Second, Tamashii had announced Roshi and Bulma, both of which were key Dragon Ball characters. Perhaps Dragon Ball characters are to be considered a subdivision of the line, and as a result are not going to be in true scale with the rest of the releases. Now getting back to the figure itself, another fantastic addition with this release is the inclusion of the very first Dragon Ball in the line. Tamashii has stated that they have committed to 7 Dragon Ball releases, and you can expect to collect the remaining 6 Dragon Balls with those figures. Now February was a bit quiet in terms of news, that is, until Tamashii surprised fans with the announcement of Majin Buu. However, this was not any form of Majin Buu previously shown in prototype form, rather this was the original Fat Majin Buu. He's scheduled for release later in 2018 following a cast of other figures such as Frieza, Goku, and the long-awaited Majin Vegeta. Now right after the dust began to settle following the previous news, March saw the release of Goku Black, the first supervillain to grace the line. Now despite being yet another incarnation of Goku, Goku Black was a welcome release by many fans, perhaps most notably for his Super Saiyan Rose hair sculpt. Minions worldwide were anxiously awaiting the arrival of this dark deity, and finally, their chances to grab him had arrived. Wow, who'd have thought we've come so far, yet have so many more characters to cover? This line has been around for almost a decade, and yet it feels as though it was only a couple of years ago when we first laid our eyes, and for some of us our hands, on the original Super Saiyan Goku. But what will the future hold in store for this line? What amazing innovations will we see in the future figures? And perhaps the biggest question of all, what characters will be released over the next few years? With the way things are going, the line is no doubt flourishing, and we will one day see the completion of various characters from their respective sagas come into realization through Figuarts. Until that day, we can only continue to be amazed by new releases as they come, and hope for our favorite character to be next in line. What are your favorite releases to this day? Who do you hope is next for their big announcement? Tamashii has put out surveys in the past, and my suggestion would be to make these surveys more accessible to the general community. I really wish I had a way to reach out to Tamashii to convey all of our hopes and dreams for Figuarts to them. But hey, until then, I can only keep making these videos and hope you all keep enjoying them. So keep collecting, guys, and you know what I always say, may the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Peace.